The title of this message is Pray for America at Three Levels. Pray for America at three levels. A pivotal moment in the nation is coming up, a pivotal moment for, I think, even nominal Christianity may be coming up. Paul told the Galatians that they had to make a good choice regarding the overregulation of the Judaizing party and, let's say, some things that would have, if they had gone the wrong way, and they didn't, but if they had, could have sent them off into a very bad direction. America needs to follow better influences, and we need to pray for America to follow better influences. And what Paul was saying to the Galatians in chapter 3, 4, and 5 is bad choices following bad influences can lead to decline. It can also lead, if America makes bad choices, it can lead to the decline of this nation and the decline of Christian freedom. And also, I'm going to add something, but obviously it's my opinion. I'd say pray for good influences like Rush Limbaugh. I heard, because we live in Rush Limbaugh's hometown, that Rush's cancer lung treatment didn't go well. I know cancer is tricky, and so you can't guarantee just because a series of treatments didn't go well, bad things will happen. And I think he was on the radio instead of doing his last set of treatments. If we lose him, we've lost a voice for good, rational analysis that you just don't hear in the media that often. You really don't. His 60-some years of life, he has a perspective that you're not going to get from these young reporters. Believe me, you're not going to get it. To pray that we can keep people like Rush Limbaugh around for a while longer. Pray for better leaders. That includes courts, Congress, and all the other places that count. And pray for more truth. We live in a world of lies, propaganda, half-truths. And by the way, the truth is an interesting thing. If you really want to do good propaganda, Dr. Goebbels said, put a lot of it into your entertainment. You're brainwashing them and they don't even know it. And I look at movies and shows and I say to myself, now what is that writer pushing? I happened to listen to a story in the car radio as part of our trip coming back from the feast. And immediately, I actually predicted the end of the story long before it got there. I said, this story is written as an anti-death penalty story, where you end up thinking the death penalty is the worst thing in the world. Now, it is if it's done badly, that's true. No one would doubt that. But I won't go into the details. But you can almost see things and you can tell they're pushing a propaganda agenda, much of which is unbiblical, unchristian, and does not work. It might sound good, but it does not work. And some way, if you want to push a lie, you put a little bit of truth in there, and then you blend it in such a way, but the overall impact is a lie. Fraud and fraudulent practices really are messing up the glue that holds society. One of the glues that holds society are family values. When a major leftist organization that had tons of support, especially from athletes, came out and said, we are against family values, I was shocked. I mean, I knew it, but I didn't think they'd put it on their website that boldly. We're against family values. They said, families, a mother is all kids need. They don't need a father. They actually said that. Now, I heard a week or two ago they took that down because it was getting too much. But I'm thinking, is that the craziest thing you ever heard of? That one parent is as good as two? I'm not saying there aren't some people who raise a kid all by themselves and they do a fabulous job. I'm not saying that. But as a general thing for society, you want to undermine the glue that holds society together? Yet there's stuff out there in academia and Hollywood, the movies, and all these people are giving spiritual advice online. They're telling people crazy stuff like that. In Ephesians 6, Paul said, we're not fighting against flesh and blood, but spiritual forces in high places. And that is true. We can't see it, but can't we smell it? Can't you sense it? That behind all this has got to be spiritual forces. It's not just purely just the way it worked out. There are spiritual forces. And I want to talk about 3 levels that we should pray for. And I believe what Satan wants to do, he wants to undermine, divide, weaken, and destroy the people that have Abraham's promises. In this order, he wants to destroy Israel or Judah, headquartered in Jerusalem. He wants to destroy America, headquartered in Washington, and Britain, headquartered in London, and maybe the whole British Commonwealth. Now, other people say, well, that's nervy of you to say that. That's what I really think. He really does. And things that have happened in Britain, actually, in Britain's case, it started at the end of World War II. It was the most amazing thing. They were at the big conference where they were deciding how the world would be after the victory Germany defeated. And Churchill gets the news, hey, you just been unelected. You're kidding me. No, you got to go back. You're being replaced by a socialist. Well, they call it the Labour Party, but it was socialist. And Britain was Great Britain. And at that point, Britain started to be Britain. It's no longer great. They can barely keep a navy afloat. I could give you more details, but you get the general idea. Britain gone now. And if you go to London, I could tell you stories. But I can tell you at the break, we went to London with our boys, some of the stuff we saw. When I tell you that England is not the England of old, well, and the devil has those plans for a lot of us. We just don't know it yet. The devil knows how to use the media and big tech to sow lies, discord. I want to read Isaiah 59:14. It's Isaiah 59:14. Now, this is when Judah was in great decline, and the prophet was warning them, if you don't straighten up, you're going into captivity. Well, the parallel is, because human nature is the same, Satan's the same, and God is the same. So if this applied to Judah in the days of their decline, it would apply to us in the days of our decline. Isaiah 59:14. Justice is turned back. And you look at things we're hearing about, the FBI didn't look at that laptop for a year. I could give all kinds of other stuff. Is there real justice in America like there used to be? Where is the justice? If you're on the far left, you get away with everything, and if you're the other side, you get over prosecution. Where is the justice? Justice is turned back. Righteousness stands far away. They can care less about goodness and righteousness. For truth is fallen in the streets, and equity cannot enter. That means fairness. Doesn't that picture a lot of what you have seen in the last, decade or so out of Washington? Truth has fallen in the streets, and from our media, right? Truth has fallen in the streets. By the way, big tech is blocking probably the hottest political story of the day about the laptop. They have said, we will block anybody's account, lock it down. They've locked down the oldest newspaper in America. We're not going to let this truth out. And they blocked it, and a lot of people will never hear about it. I mean, they blocked other truths too. But this is the most blatant one I can think of. And big tech has a lot of power. People say people used to get most of their news. I'm just telling what people tell me. I can't prove it. Used to get most of their news from the networks. Now they get it by going online and with their cell phone. Well, you know who controls that? The big tech are run by a bunch of, I call them, to me, relatively young, very, very liberal people. And they've been blocking all kinds of stuff that they don't want you to see. Or they make it hard, very difficult to find. Truth has fallen. If you think truth is on your cell phone or your tablet, a lot of it is locked up and blocked. Truth has fallen. Of course, television media is bad too. All over. It's bad. And they're overly scaring people and giving them bad information, even about COVID. Like most people don't know, even to this day, that young people, COVID's not a threat to them. Many more of them will die this year and last year of the regular flu. For some reason, COVID has been engineered, I guess, to mostly go after elderly and people with certain underlying health conditions. Not that that's good, but I'm saying schools are safe. The kids are, but they don't know that. Oh, there'll be a few exceptions. Of course, there are a few exceptions to any disease. Maybe some of the older teachers need to worry, but the kids are safe. That stuff doesn't. But most people don't know that. They kind of scared. We're all going to die. One of my relatives won't let my grandkids travel. Anyway, I won't go into detail. She's scared spitless, and they're about as healthy and safe. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. Anything can happen to anybody at any moment. But you get my point. They don't know the truth about it. They've hidden it. Also, those that depart from evil are attacked. Verse 15, Isaiah 59:15. Truth fails, and he who departs from evil makes himself a prey. In other words, when you leave evil, they come after you, like vultures or hawks or a wolf pack. The Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no justice. When I think of verse 15, I think of Sarah Palin. Now, the way I remember it, she, at least as she sees herself, no politician's perfect, but she sees herself as a born-again Christian. And the media sensed that she was a threat, potentially, because she's a good campaigner, to what they had in mind, a very liberal move for America. And I could see them like vultures. It was a spirit. Let's attack her and destroy her. Couldn't you sense it? I could sense it. And they ripped her apart. Poor woman, I felt sorry for her, although she may come back in the Senate in 2022. I guess we will see. I know a particular rich celebrity who about 20 years ago, he was a billionaire, Playboy, New York. He, claimed he got converted and became a Christian. But most of all, he switched away from, like everybody else, in Hollywood and his circle, being pro-abortion, for being pro-life. And he started making public statements against it. All of a sudden, the guy who was so popular with the media, they turned on him like a wolf pack. They've been turning on him ever since. He's been making too many conservative statements that they didn't like. And but it makes sense of that scripture, that he who departs from evil makes himself a prey. Instead of being praised, you become the one they're going to get. And I've seen every now and then some famous person will say, hey, I don't think what we're doing is right. And then a whole bunch of other celebrities and media type come down on them like, you say, whoa. Like one famous rapper, anyway, he went to the White House and said some things which I thought were pro-family and good. A major network said he was mentally insane and was sick. And I'm not making this up, you're thinking. And he may have had some problems in the past. I'm not saying the guy's perfect. But I could see the motive behind what they were saying. You could see it. And it fits that scripture perfectly. Isaiah 59, 3-5. Isaiah 59, 3. And he's talking about the leadership and the opinion leaders of Israel. For your hands are defiled with blood, your fingers with iniquity, your lips have spoken lies, your tongue has muttered perversity. No one calls for justice, nor does any plead for truth. In other words, no one wants truth or justice. They trust in empty words and speak lies. Here's the part I think is interesting. They conceive evil and bring forth iniquity. They hatch viper's eggs and weave spider webs. In other words, they create these elaborate, complex conspiracies and ways to attack people and try to tie them up in court and destroy them. Spider's webs, from which is crushed a viper breaks out. Endless witch hunts, bad investigations, and just petty secret schemes. And you wonder how much of the deep state including, people in law enforcement and in the media are behind many of these bad things. Romans 10, verse 1. Romans 10:1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they may be saved. In other words, Paul prayed for Israel, or mostly in this case it was the Jewish people. Paul prayed for them. For I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God. Now, if Paul prayed for Israel, we should pray for Israel. Does that make sense? If Paul said pray for Israel, we should also pray for Israel. All of us should pray for Israel. Another verse, Genesis 12, 2-3. As God said Abraham was a friend of God, and he chose Abraham. And there are stories where people who seemed to curse Abraham, God pounced on them. And those that blessed Abraham, God was with them. Genesis 12:2. And God told Abraham, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. And you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse him who curses you. Then he says, all the world will be blessed through Abraham. So that's saying we should pray for Israel if we want to be blessed. Now, I'm going to expand out Israel to be more than just little Judah over there in Jerusalem. I mean, that's good too, of course. I want to expand it out because I believe it's appropriate. And for those who hear this tape that may not understand it, right at our church we have literature about the lost 10 tribes and other things that in Britain and America and prophecy that'll help you see it. But I think we should pray for Israel, but also pray for America, and also pray for the British Commonwealth. I believe if we pray, if you want God to bless you, then you should bless and pray for the people of God. And I mean this in a national sense. And if you want God to curse you, then you should be against the people of God. And you're going to say, nobody's against America and Israel. I don't know. I hear Jewish people say things that make me think they're against the Jewish nation. I'm not making this up. I hear Americans who not only say unpatriotic things, but make me think they're against America. Now, I'm not saying people in China or Russia or Iran or a whole bunch, or Germany. I'm saying I hear American celebrities and leaders say stuff is not only unpatriotic, it makes me think they are against America. They dislike America and what America stands for. And they're teaching the younger generation that. That's what I call cursing America, and I think they're not going to be blessed for it. But I believe it's troubling. Why are they attacking the flag? And we could talk about American history and all that at another time, but isn't the flag a symbol of patriotism and love of country? There's nothing wrong with loving your country. Now, you can say we can improve it. You can always improve, and no one's against that. But you should pray for your own country. And teaching our kids to dislike our own country is crazy. But that's what much of higher education, I saw it myself in my own eyes, somewhere in the 60s. It's like higher education flipped and become more and more anti-patriotic, more anti-military, more anti-flag. I saw it. It's kind of hard to believe, and it's gotten stronger and they've become anti-Semitic too. Where one Jewish guy went to some college, and he said he felt persecuted, like they were out to get him. That wasn't true 30, 40 years ago. He felt unsafe on an American college campus because he was obviously Jewish and dressed it. I thought, oh, this is America. I heard him on the radio the other day. And secondly, at a second level, we should pray for the belief systems within this country. If you want to call it nominal Christianity and Judaism or whatever you want to use, we should pray for the belief systems in this country. If I were to go back to 60 years ago, like when I was in high school, about 1959, 1960, as I remember it, people were nicer, Neighbors were nicer. There was less violence. I never even heard the term a pedagogue. I mean, the guys that pedophile. I meant pedophile, who go after young children. I never heard the term. We rode our bicycle all over, even at night. Nobody ever bothered us. Now, that's the way I remember it. And people were safe. There was some criminals. I'm not obviously, but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that violent. You felt reasonably safe. Most people believed in the Bible. Most people believe in family values. I know different churches have different doctrines, but still, for the most part, I'd say 70-80% of the people believed in the Bible. And they believed in God. If you went back 90 years in the past, it was even more so than that, if you really did. And people like FDR, he actually prayed to God on the day of the D-Day invasion. For those who only remember that on the radio, you think, whoa. And of course, that was what he did. Martin Luther King quoted the Bible all over the place. So did Abraham Lincoln. Most of you know all that. But things have changed. Things have changed. And I heard this just on the radio recently, some survey. I'll call it surveys of Christians from the Christian left. We have what I call now the Christian left. 44% say the Bible does not condemn abortion. They say 44% of Christians in America say the Bible does not condemn abortion. Wow, how do you like that? 50%, so-called Christians in America based on this survey, say that church attendance is not required. You can be a Christian, but you don't have to go to church. You just sort of say it in your mind. So like one guy said, being a Christian without going to church and doing certain things, it's sort of like somebody saying you go into a garage and that makes you a car. You can't be a Christian unless you do certain things, even in the very loose set of the standards. Isaiah 5:20, this is that same time period we're reading about as Israel, Judah faded away from God. Isaiah 5:20, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Have you noticed that? They're flipping things upside down, right? If you stand for certain things which would have been considered evil and perverted, if you don't stand for those things, now you're evil. It's like we flipped it. And all kinds of things are demonstrations, including looting, is good. You're going to say, wait a minute, did he just say that? But I've heard people in the mainstream media say burning and stealing, because that's what looting is, good. Like, my ears just tricked me. But I'm not making this up, because you think, he just said this, unbelievable. And they have clever ways of justifying it. They say, heard this lady, Jen Martell from Minneapolis. She says, Minneapolis just doesn't have a few scarred areas from the rioting. They have miles and miles of the city that is gone and probably will never, ever come back. Because how many businesses, they say, oh, we want you to invest in this particular part of Minneapolis. Are you crazy? There'll be a few, but not that many. Think about it. And it's often the poorest people, minorities who live there, who are going to suffer the most. Like I remember a lady was saying, by the way, do you know Ferguson, Missouri used to be a great neighborhood a few years back? Well, the lady said that she could walk to the drugstore, who lives there. It's now a 2-mile plus trip to get anything like that in Ferguson, because I guess the CVS and all those places are gone and they haven't come back yet. Now, there are people who are cheering them on. I'm not making this up. This is the kind of crazy stuff that goes on in this country. Romans 8:1-28. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind. Some translations put other words besides debased, but you get the general idea. to do things which are not fitting, things that don't work. And that's happening at least in certain parts of America. Here's what we should pray for. We should pray that we can reverse some of those trends, or at least slow them down. Because if good is bad and evil is good, and we start teaching that to young people, think of what damage that will do to society as things get worse and worse and worse, as things go down, down, down. That's what the world is looking at. So at least we should pray that on a national level, these belief systems can get back to somewhat normalcy, reasonable, and we can get some godly values. By the way, this one, I call him far left minister, he was saying there's no reason you shouldn't vote for the party whose holy grail is abortion. There's no reason why you shouldn't vote for them. Because pro-life is more than just not killing babies. It's what you do for the child after he's born. And basically what he's saying is socialism. If this party promises to give them more freebies, then they're more pro-life. Now, and the way he said it, it sounds so valuable. The babies that we don't kill, will give them some free government stuff. By the way, socialism doesn't work and it's not good for people. We all kind of know that. But he doesn't know that, and the people listening to him don't know that. But see how clever that sounds? We're really more pro-life because we believe in giving a lot of government stuff. Actually, they're not giving government stuff. They're taking government stuff from one person and redistributing to somebody else, which is actually stealing. And as Margaret Thatcher says, socialism works until you run out of other people's money. And actually, believe me, it sounds good. It just never, ever worked anywhere it was tried. But, they call it social justice and all that. And so we're more pro-life. Even though we believe in killing the babies, we're more pro-life than those people who don't want to kill the babies but aren't socialist. And I guess he has many Christians who believe that. Wow. Let me tell you a Thanksgiving prayer story. It's kind of a joke, but little Bobby was asked to give the prayer at the big family Thanksgiving, all holding hands. And he did a good job. He thanked God for all his friends. He thanked God for all of his uncles and aunts, even the crazy ones. He thanked God for his siblings and his parents. He thanked God for the turkey. He thanked God for the rolls. He thanked God for the pies, pumpkin pies. Then there was a long silence. And his mother asked, what's the silence for? He says, well, I know, he says, if I thank God for the broccoli, God will know I'm lying. Natalie feels that way about Brussels sprouts. But anyway, but at least the boy had real morals. He wasn't going to pray something that wasn't true. Isn't that what we need to pray for? More real morals, right? And a lot of these Bible morals are not things that churches disagree on. Most, at least I'd say we go back 30, 40 years ago, they used to say abortion should be rare and only in most dire circumstances. That's what they used to say, if you have to do it at all. Nobody was for it. Now, at least 2 states, they not only want you to do it at the last minute, but if the kid happens to pop out in a certain percentage too, before they get to slice and dice its brain, you get to decide whether you want to let the baby live or not. That's infant. And I'm not making that up because people say, he made it up. I heard 2 governors say it out of their own mouths, at least to the video. I thought, wow. That's how far we have gone the last 30, 40 years. People used to all agree with that kind of thing. We should pray for greater morals. Psalms 122:5. Psalms 122:5. For thrones are set there for judgment, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. Peace be within your walls, prosperity within your palaces. So here's what God commands. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. if you want to be blessed. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And they are working out a peace deal. I'm told there are 5 Islamic countries that are now signing total peace deals with Israel. Not just that we won't attack you, we want our territory back. I mean, actual peace. They're going to do business together and, airlines connection and embassy exchange, a whole bit. That is a wonderful thing. We should pray for that. And the president should have gotten a Nobel Peace, but they gave it to somebody for some minor thing nobody heard of. But I understand. Nobel committee was under great pressure not to give it to a certain person because of, and they're liberal. I understood the pressure they were under. So nobody's really that surprised. But we should pray because this is a big deal. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But I want to add 2 more extensions to that. But I think in principle it applies. Pray for peace in Washington, D.C., and pray for peace in London. Washington and London as well, because I believe it's the same basic people and just expanded it out. And I know they're talking about there are going to be riots in Washington very soon, and all kinds, at least I've heard all kinds of groups are going to come out and protest, and we'll see what happens. But pray for peace in Washington, D.C., and in places like New York as well. The third level, so we can pray for the moral systems and the churches in this country in the sense that they get back to moral, reasonable levels. The third level, pray for the Church of God. The churches that have the deeper understanding of the Bible. And I know when I say this, it sounds outrageous. As small as we are, the devil knows who we are. He notices what we're doing, and we're on his target list. I know you'll say, that's hard to believe. He got all these mega churches. He's got everything going his way. He could care less about us. We are more important than we think we are. And I know I say that, and it's hard, it's unbelievable. I still believe it. Pray for the Church of God. If there's anything he wants us to fall away from the truth, get divided, start infighting. Here's something that came out, one of the church reports. They're now finding as states open up and COVID restrictions are over, about 20% of churches are out of business. They never come back. Don't you think that was one of Satan's goals? Cut down Christianity and churches. Even, I believe this is happening in the Jewish synagogues and even Catholic churches, attendance is dramatically down. Now some people are like, well, if I want any spirituality, I'll go on the internet and I can find something on the internet. And I'm not putting down using the internet to find good material. There's a lot of bad material out there too. But is that the same thing? No. You don't get the fellowship. And there's something like in person that is not the same as watching it on your smartphone or your tablet. It's just not, I'm not putting those things down. That's a good augmentation, but it's not the same thing. And Satan wants America to have less people thinking about their spiritual lives and spiritual things. Satan is happy. And if you look at especially the more left-wing states like California, they're working, it seems like, overtime to put churches out of business. New York City is threatening to close up churches and synagogues, never let them open again. That's what the mayor of New York said. I don't know how that will ultimately work out. But can't you see the devil in all that? We want to shut churches down. Well, he didn't want us to go to the Feast of Tabernacles, and I think he wants our church to decline significantly, and he's working at it. And I think it's important to him, and we need to resist, right? Don't get discouraged. Don't stop attending. Don't stop supporting. Try not to divide and fight unnecessarily over every little. You know how human nature is, don't you? Galatians 5, verse 7. Remember, I started off by talking how Paul mentioned that sometimes just a few troublemakers can make all the difference in the world. Now here's Paul's warning to the Galatian church about the troublemakers that they had to deal with. Galatians 5, verse 7. Galatians 5:7, Paul writes, "You ran well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion does not come from him who calls you." Notice, it didn't come from God, the Holy Spirit. It didn't come from Paul. "A little leaven leavens the whole lump." Verse 10, "But he who troubles you shall bear his judgment wherever he is." And Paul gives certain warnings like that in Corinthians. I don't know if Paul knew the names of the troublemakers. Maybe he intentionally didn't put in the letter giving them room to repent. Actually, Paul actually said that to the Corinthians. He said, the reason I didn't come to you the third time is I want to give you all a chance, give you room and to repent. Because when I do come, it's going to be, I'm going to be hard on certain people, and I'd rather not do that. So maybe that's why he didn't misname. He's giving them a warning. And we believe that that church did stay the course for the most part, most of them. And they did fine. But you can see how troublemakers can divide. And Satan loves that. Oh, man, put it in to cause trouble. And Satan wants you to stay home. Let me say that again. Satan wants us to stay home. Now I can say that now that you're all here because she says, not us. He wants you to stay home and spiritually get decadent and weaker. That's what he really wants. And he's gotten at least more of that in the world and maybe in some church groups already because of this COVID-19 thing. I wonder if the Chinese unleashed this intentionally under the inspiration of the devil. But I can only guess that. But even if they didn't do it intentionally, the devil saw the opportunity and capitalized on it. You can see that, can't you? Beware of troublemakers. Remember, we need the fellowship. You might think you don't need it, and I know it's easy to feel that way. Dealing with people can be problematic, but we need the fellowship. We need one another. Hebrews 10:24 and 25, Paul warns the Christians, we believe these are mostly Jewish Christians, who he thinks were kind of getting discouraged. Paul says, do not neglect gathering together. Do not neglect attendance. Do not neglect fellowship. Then he gives them some warnings about falling away. They could lose their salvation. And it's a dire warning. When you read that part from Hebrews 10:24 all the way to the end of the chapter, it's a very dire warning. Paul is saying, in effect, don't stay home. Isn't that what he's saying? Fellowship with the other brethren. Stay as spiritually involved as you can. Pray for the churches of God. I don't know what Satan has up his sleeve, but I'm sure he'll be throwing more punches at us in the next couple of years. He's not going to leave us alone. You think, well, maybe he screwed up the worldwide church, but the devil's now satisfied. He'll leave us alone. I don't believe it. I don't think it. I think he's well aware of it. The one thing that Satan knows that we probably don't know, Satan knows that God can use one person or one congregation at a key moment to make all the difference in the world. And you can see that when you study history of men and things. I would argue that, say someone like Ronald Reagan gave America a reprieve. We were in a decline. He gave us 20-some years of relative prosperity because he turned the economy around. We didn't go into anything deep like all those horrible Carter years of deflation and all the horrible things that went on then. And also, I like the way he said it. He said, they said, well, you need to compromise with the communists. He said, no, we need to win. He called it an evil empire. And then press went crazy, like, oh, you can't call them an evil empire. But they were. And they're gone now. And they're trying to make a comeback now through global warming and other clever things. Maybe not the same group, but the same kind of socialist communist system trying to come back in other ways. The devil's behind that. But Ronald Reagan made a difference. And I don't know if there was another politician in 1980 and the people who supported could have done what Ronald Reagan did. had the perspective that he had. If you listen to him, and I saw it right away, I understood it and saw it. And I believe we may have someone like that today who is different. I'm not saying they're perfect, but different and can make a difference. Well, you can go back to, do you realize that if it weren't for Winston Churchill, the Nazis and the fascists probably would have won World War II? We actually know this from historical records. The British cabinet was willing to sign a peace treaty with Hitler that was unfavorable to Britain, the British Empire, and it would favor the fascists. They're going to give some of their key bases to Mussolini. He was going to broker a deal, and they would agree to let Hitler do anything he wanted. And you think about what would have happened. And Churchill got chosen by the King of England to be very, very fortuitous choice. He didn't get elected. By the King of England. And Churchill knew what they were up to, and he called a bigger cabinet meeting. He literally talked them out of it. One man, at one time, made a difference. And when Britain was losing the Battle of Britain, I watched this battle, and I'll get back to the topic. He spent a whole day at British Fighter Command, and I think it was September 1940, when the Germans were sending 2 gigantic waves of bombers to, it was called saturation bombing of London and some other key cities, to break the will of the British people to resist. Churchill spent the whole day at British Fighter Command. We now know that British radar was better than anybody else's early. They would actually spot the German planes taking off in Paris. And they had all these people and women moving where the planes were coming from. And he was there to encourage them. And they sent up about everybody they had. Some of these pilots would go up, fight off waves of German fighters, land back, refuel, rest of it, go back up in the air. And he made that famous statement after the battle. And they actually took apart the Luftwaffe. And the Germans never made another daytime bombing raid like that on England again. He said, no, his exact words, never have so many owed so much to so few. Just a few pilots in Britain turned the tide. Actually, Churchill had a lot to do with even them developing the Spitfire fighter, but that's a whole nother story. But one man made all the difference in the world. And the press back then was, even in England, was kind of loosey-goosey. They wanted to cooperate with Hitler, and I understand everybody was afraid of him. It's always understandable. Let's give them what they want so we don't suffer. I believe this little church could make a difference someday. We just have to believe it. And whatever it does, it's in God's hands. We just have to go with it. Does that make sense? We'll never do anything significant. Well, maybe that's true, but just keeping the truth alive is of value. But pray for the churches of God. We are a target of evil. And like our feast site in California was a victim of what I call the way the world is going. And remember spiritual weapons and spiritual warfare. In Ephesians, Paul gives advice like, use the shield of faith, the sword of Bible knowledge, hope, and prayer. And as prayer is one of our weapons. In conclusion, just want to say, pray for this nation. Pray for Israel. Pray for the British Commonwealth. Pray for moral standards in America in general, that we can have more rational stuff instead of some of this crazy stuff that's being pushed. It's crazy stuff being pushed out there. Pray for the churches of God, because we're a big target, and I can see Satan stirring up trouble wherever he can. Satan ramps up evils and attacks. Pray for the election, and pray for calm after the election. Pray for love, and pray for unity.